A lot of times when we talk about language change, we tend to focus on letters getting dropped or pronunciation getting simplified over time. And we can see lots of examples of sounds that got lost over time or letters that got dropped that are still reflected in the spelling of words, even though they're not reflected in the pronunciation. While English is notorious for continuing to write letters even though they're no longer pronounced, in my opinion, French is just as guilty, if not worse. But if the only changes that ever happened in a language were reductions in sound or simplifications in pronunciation, eventually you'd expect us to all end up speaking like this. So the question is, do languages ever add sounds? Well, going back to French, it actually has one of the most unique and interesting examples of a sound being added to a language that I can think of, and weirdly, I never hear anybody talking about it. So for certain speakers of French, when an utterance ends in a high or mid vowel, so like E or A, they tend to devoice the vowel and then add a sh sound to the end of it. That's a sh sound. If you're familiar with German, it's a sound
in words such as ich.
And not only is this sh sound not reflected in the spelling of the word, it's also not even listed among the sounds that are supposed to exist in the language. I definitely don't remember learning about it when I was in school. Let's take some examples to see what it sounds like.
Oui.
Oui. Oui. Postuler.
Oui. Aujourd'hui.
So why does this happen? Well, there's a couple of theories, and I'll link an article that talks about one of them in depth. But basically, since the high vowels like E are pronounced with the tongue very high in the mouth, a small stream of air, a thin, narrow stream of air goes over the tongue. Now, when you pronounce the sh sound, it's very close, but it's a little bit raised so that the air that's forced between your palate and your tongue creates turbulence, which makes that sound. All of a sudden, a new consonant slips in there. You can see the similarity between the two sounds with these two images. So I guess you could say that the sound appears out of thin air.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
So when I first noticed this phenomenon, I assumed it must be more recent or a modern thing because I don't remember ever learning about it in school, like I said, and it definitely seems, I don't know, super noteworthy. You'd think someone would have mentioned it at some point. But as it turned out, it's not very recent, which I discovered when I found this little gem.
15 ans et demi.
Oh.
Oui. Non, jamais. Oui.
So in that short clip, the girl produces the sh sound at every possible instance that she could have done so. So clearly this has been happening for a while, which is fascinating. Originally, the sound was said to be restricted to Parisian French, so the French spoken in Paris, but I'm pretty sure I've heard it in other cases. This is totally anecdotal, but I've even heard some Haitians using this pronunciation in Haitian Creole. Is this sound going to stay restricted to those limited circumstances and with that limited set of speakers? Or will it become more widespread and maybe even a standardized part of the language? Who knows? That's the cool thing about language change. By the way, that video was about the way French people viewed interracial dating back in the 60s, so you should definitely check that out. It's pretty wild.
Ce couple, comment le regarderiez-vous, vous?
Un peu bizarre.
Oui.
All right, that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Bye.